All right, so, without further ado, for the candidates, my question is, can you tell us a little bit about yourselves, your educational background, your professional background, and your ties within Howard County?
Thank you. So, good evening, and a special thanks to everyone who helped organize. It's really exciting to be here at the 100th anniversary. This is the 100th year of Carol Baldwin, so it is exciting to be in this space. I'm Christiana Rigby. I'm a Democrat, and I represent District 3. It has really been my honor to do so. I am born and raised and boomeranged back to Howard County to raise my family, and it really has been an honor to represent you. My educational background is in environmental policy. I've worked on issues that are environmental in other states as well as here. I've worked with a lot of nonprofits. That's really been my background in the health and human services realm, and really wanted to take that to the system level on the council to, I think we're having some audio issues. But over the last few years on the council, I've worked very collaboratively with the executive branch and the council to pass landmark legislation, increase funding for District 3 schools. And my top legislative priorities have really been increasing school funding, taking climate action, expanding access to accessible and affordable housing, and really building a better transportation system. So I look forward to your questions in the conversation.
I'm old, so I've got a long resume. But I started off my first 25 years as an engineer, then I got drafted into finance and logistics and contracting. I was the chief engineer of the Naval Supply Systems Command and fixed the $600 toilet seat and $400 hammer problem they had in the 80s. In the 90s, I went to the Coast Guard. I was their first chief financial officer. They became the first and only armed service ever to get a clean audit opinion. I then went to the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs. I was the assistant secretary. I was a presidential appointee confirmed by the Senate as the assistant secretary for management and chief financial officer. And the first thing I did was I negotiated pharmaceutical prices for our veterans. We bought $6 billion worth of pharmaceuticals one year. The next year it cost for the same amount, $3.5 billion, and we were able to plow that $2.5 billion back into health care for veterans. After I left the government, I was the chief financial officer for Amtrak. I couldn't make them make money, but they lost less money with me than they had ever lost before. I've lived in Howard County 48 years. I love the community, and I don't want to have to move. And I see some things that are happening here that may cause me and my wife to finally have to pull up anchor and leave. And I want to avoid that. My management background can help Howard County. We are a large business with a $2.4 billion budget, and we have 9%, 5,500 of our children are being taught in trailers, and they're unsafe. And my goal is to get them out of those trailers and behind solid concrete block walls and steel doors and windows. Thank you.
All right, so, I had some warm-up questions in mind. I also have some prepared ones from the audience that are submitted ahead of time. This one just happens to match right up with one of my warm-up questions. So where can residents in Southeast Howard County learn to swim? In this regards, my warm-up question was, so we were told that there was an approved plan for a community pool at the North Laurel Community Center. For whatever reason in the budget, last year, that seems to have been put on hold or potentially eliminated. And again, so where can residents in Southeast Howard County learn to swim?
All right, so not enough places. You're probably aware of the Hammond Park pool, but in regards to the county facility, it was funded my first year in office, and then pandemic hit, and then it was taken out. But the good news is that we've received state funding, and that actually gives an accountability timeline. So that state funding means the project has to occur within a certain time frame. So I'm excited that we got the funding, that it's back on track, and that soon we'll all be together in the pool there. So.
I'm not so sanguine about that. So I've looked at alternatives. Even if you get the money for the pool, it's going to take you 2 years to get your pool. So I've decided to look at alternatives. The Columbia Association has numerous pools, and most of them are empty. And I don't see why we can't try to work out an agreement either to lease the pools or have subsidized membership, or even buy them outright, because they've had to close pools because they didn't have enough people. Right across the border in Prince George's County, you have a recreational facility near the Gardens Ice House. And one of the first things I would like to do is to see about working out an inter-county agreement where, because a lot of people from Anne Arundel and Prince George's County use our North Laurel Community Center. So why can't we treat this as an area issue until we get a pool built?
All right. Okay, moving on. Let's see. Okay, I'll go on with, this is a rather pointed warm-up question. Again, so we've seen that in the most recent budget that's come out, there is a new high school being built within District 3. That's going to greatly affect, where our students or young adults in Howard County get their education. And, going back to, well, that's going to also allow additional development according to our adequate public facilities ordinances. Now, a lot of our children are, experiencing some class time in trailers. That's been going on for at least a decade, longer. And I just wanted to ask, as you're elected, what measures will you take to try to improve the adequate public facilities ordinance so that our kids don't have to spend significant parts of their days in trailer classrooms, both within District 3 or as a holistic county solution?
So APFO alone isn't going to solve our problems because if you have a wait time, but you just wait and you don't do anything else, you don't build new schools, you don't go after state funding, you don't really increase the capacity, then that's wasted time. The whole purpose of the adequate public facilities ordinance is to give time for the county to do those kinds of things, to work with the Board of Education. And so I'd say that kind of have to bifurcate. So in terms of school funding, the council and the county executive have done what I think a lot of people thought was going to be impossible. And we have expanded and renovated Hammond High School. We have built High School 13, and then we've also expanded and renovated Talbot Springs Elementary. So I think we have to continue the progress on meeting the capacity needs that we have and build the schools, but then also there is so much more we can do within APFO than have a wait time. Mr. Campbell talked about potentially having to leave Howard County, and that's the reality for a lot of folks here. We do not have a lot of housing types that are stair-free, I would call them. When as you get older, those stairs become a significant issue. So we need more types of housing available, and we could steer that in APFO. Because right now, we have apartment buildings and we have single-family detached homes, but we are missing all the things in the middle of that, which you can see actually in Savage. Savage is a great example of that. We have duplexes. We have lots of missing middle types of housing. So why not sort of shift how we look at APFO and work to get our senior housing so that way we have more options. And if you want to stay in your home, you should be able to. And if you want to move and you have mobility concerns that mean you need a different style of home, you should have that option here in Howard County. You shouldn't have to leave your network and community of support. So I think that there are a lot of things we can do by law. APFO will be considered in 2023. Every, it's either 4 or 5 years, it comes up again for a committee so that we can analyze that. And I think we need to look at things beyond. Right now, APFO just does school capacity and then widens roads. Mr. Campbell and I both agree you cannot widen your road out of the problem of traffic congestion. There is a lot more that can be done and a lot more that could be done for adequate public facilities ordinance. Talk all night about it, sorry.
The adequate public facilities ordinance, I believe, was started in 1991. It's been an abject failure. One of the reasons it's been a failure is it hasn't looked at all of the things that are truly important. It's been looking at school overcrowding, school capacity, and it has failed miserably. 9% of our 57,000 kids, 5,500 of them, are in trailers. And if we go forward with the Kerwin blueprint, it's going to get worse because we're going to stick a lot of pre-K kids in the trailers. So what we need to do is look at APFO and say, what other things are important to the community? Did you know that the Federal Bureau of Investigation recommends 2 sworn police officers for every 1,000 residents? That means instead of 480 police, we should have 660 police. The World Health Organization recommends that you have 3 hospital beds per 1,000 residents. We have 255. We should have about 1,000. Those are things that need to be cranked into APFO, and we're not going to develop our way out of this problem. Over on that table, there are 2 cans. One can is the $1 billion bill that they have not told you about that we need for school construction to get the existing children out of mobile classrooms. And the smaller can, to scale, is $500 million, $500 million for deferred maintenance. We've not been putting on new roofs, we've not been putting in HVAC, we've been ignoring the problem. I will not ignore the problem. That's the reason I'm running.
All right. So at this time, those are my warm-up questions for the candidates. I'd like to solicit from the crowd, and don't all run up at once, but whoever has questions to directly address the candidates, please step up and form a queue right here in front of the mic.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My question is, we had an issue with not having housing for the elderly, but yet every time housing is approved in Howard County for the elderly, somebody comes in, a builder, developer, comes in and changes the zoning. So then that housing gets kicked to the curb. You still have all these people that have no place to go, and it's all about the dollar in Howard County, and it needs to be something a little different than the dollar. So my question is, what do we do to go about actually somebody following through and making sure that there is actually a housing facility for the elderly people in Howard County? Thank you.
Absolutely. This is a great opportunity to talk about one of the most important things that we do as a county that has one of the most boring names. It's called the General Plan. You may have heard of it through different terms like HOCO by design, but ultimately it's our community planning document. It's a state required document, and it is done about every 10-ish years. But part of the issue with that is that you plan 10 years ago, but things have changed. I mean, look at inflation, look at interest rates, look at the pandemic alone has really reevaluated how many of us sort of view our neighborhoods, communities, and how we get around. So part of it is building a plan and having a community vision plan that says this is what we want, and then have the zoning actually reflect that. Because the cost of land is so high, that's what part of the reason, and the way that those zoning regulations are written, that they maximize, that's why these massive 55 plus villas that are so expensive, that many seniors can't sell their existing home and move into them. So one thing that's been done in other places around the country is cottage communities. These are smaller, single-story, sort of close-knit communities that have really great landscaping, and it's even better if I can show you a picture, because once you see it, then people kind of get it a bit more, but feel free to Google cottage communities. And those will create actually affordable units. They would hopefully be, you know, when you were looking at it, around $300,000 versus the current sort of $700,000, $800,000. I mean, that is a huge difference in terms of what an elderly couple would be able to move into. So that's the market side. Then additionally, we need to be looking at our housing commission and how we do that work. That is, they either have land or you can subsidize the unit, but there are things that we can do as a county. We now finally, like our neighboring jurisdictions, have a housing trust fund, and we can utilize that to create that senior housing. Because it is needed, and it takes so long for it to come on. I mean, many people are still waiting in terms of the senior housing over Banneker. We have one tiny building over in Monarch Mills. It is not enough, and we need it both in terms of sort of what I would call elevator condos, and then we also need it in terms of just smaller, safe for your mobility, single-family detached homes where people can age in the community.
One of the big problems is that's the future. And you can't fight a war with the army you want. You have to fight the war with the army you have. And so what is affordable housing here in Howard County? It's apartments. Go online. Look at the websites for the apartments. And look at the comments left by the residents. They're horrible. They're on a scale of 1 to 5, at least in my neighborhood in Columbia. The one's a 1.2 and one's a 1.3. And these are actual quotes. My girlfriend is afraid to walk the dog. People are getting robbed in the parking lot. They won't do maintenance. Rats, mice. We as a county have an obligation to make sure that every resident has a safe and secure domain to live in. And we're not doing that. So until we get our act together and start doing that, I'm somewhat reluctant to want to just leap in and build more density into the, because grandma and grandpa may live in that unit this year, but next year it might be a young family. And for every 500 residences we build, whether they're McMansions or they're single bedroom apartments, we get 200 school children. Think about it. So when you want to do things like affordable housing, it has consequences. We need to get our act right now before we leap into more. We have been having explosive residential growth for 60 years. When I first moved out here in 1974, there was a Owen Brown Road crossed Route 29. It was at grade and no light. That's how rural this area was. And it's not rural anymore. And I look at what's happened in Elkridge. I was appalled. I went up to a forum up at the library in Elkridge. I didn't know all of those apartments were there. The traffic, the pollution, and we are creating pockets of poverty. We're creating pockets of poverty. We're putting people into bad living conditions. So please go on the websites and look at what people are putting up with for, quote, affordable housing now. And some of the things we do, aging in place. For the last 2 years, my wife and I have gotten a break on our tax bill. It's not much, and I feel guilty because I really don't need it. I would like the county council to look at expanding the program and making it more needs-based so that people that actually have a financial issue can live in dignity. But we don't do that. We just put out a one-size-fits-all, and it doesn't fit very well.
Sorry, can I please clarify a few things?
Oh, sure. 1 minute.
Sure. So just so everyone's aware, because I really, if you're eligible for these things, I want you to be able to take advantage of them. We also have a veterans tax credit. We have a senior tax credit that is separate from how long you've lived in a particular domicile. If you have questions about tax credits, please let me know, because I would love to link you to them. And we're actually discussing expanding the aging in place tax credit this month. And then lastly, I'll just say, to be very clear, the types of housing I'm talking about are already found throughout Savage. I'm not saying we need to build large, massive apartment blocks. I'm saying we could, you could have 2 retired women living in a duplex that's sort of one up, one down. They're ADA. They are not, they're more studio-like. You wouldn't have 4 kids in a studio apartment that's ADA accessible. So those are the types of things I'm talking about. I just really wanted to make that clear so people understood. Thank you.
I'd like to make it clear there's no way to enforce that. And as the years pass by, it will be violated.
Let's move on. Do we have any other questions on either on that topic specifically or any other topic?
I got another one.
Gentlemen, Richard, did you have any questions in mind? Okay. All right. Well, then I will turn over the floor to Claire then.
My next question is, the elderly people that live in this town can't afford to live in this town anymore. And our county council has voted, or someone has voted, to raise our taxes. Even though the property values went down some, our taxes went up a whole bunch. I live on a half-acre lot in Savage. I'm paying $8,800 a year in taxes. It is appalling. And the elderly people that are living in this town, there is a choice of either, you can eat. You were talking about housing for them, but it's like you can either eat, you can get your prescriptions,
Right.
or where are you going to live, because they can't afford to do all of it. And then if they have a house, they have to pay this monstrosity of taxes. Who's going to do something about the taxes? Because we've been complaining about this for about 20 years now, and nobody's doing nothing or ignoring the fact. Thank you.
Sure. So the state does tax assessments every 3 years, and then when they reassess you, then that's when it raises. So that's a function of the State Department of Taxation coming around, looking at the properties and assessing them and saying, this is at a higher rate. And then the actual amount that you pay does go up, even though we haven't, raised the tax rate. So just to clarify that. But that doesn't mean it's not a very real problem. So today we were talking about the aging into place tax credit, the expansion of that, looking at doing property tax deferments. So that way, when people are aging in place, they don't have to make those really difficult choices, because it's not just, you have all those things, but then the cost of food is going up, Medicare is going up, prescriptions are going up. The cost to just get by is going up so much. And so then it really becomes a significant burden. So we're talking about deferments, and we're talking about the expansion of credits. But I would say that we are, just today, we had about an hour-long conversation and trying to figure out what to do, and we do have a bill before us that will expand the tax credit.
The rate is set by the county, and they have not reduced the rates. They have kept the rates pretty much the same. However, they haven't built any schools because they're afraid that the taxpayers will revolt if they have to raise the property taxes again to pay the $1 billion for the schools and the $500 million for the renovations. I have been through the budget. I went through the county, the Howard County Public School System. I went through their 668-page budget, and I've made a little guide, a citizen's guide to Howard County Public School System. It's 14 pages. The first 11 pages talk about things like finances, number of employees, and so forth. The last 3 pages are the performance of our schools, which is not good. Regardless, we may be the best in the state, but that's a very low bar. I've also looked at every single page of the Howard County budget. I do not think we need to raise taxes to pay for the schools. And I do think that there might be some things that we could do to cut back so that we could afford to give tax breaks, particularly for people that need it. I may not ask for it. If I was paying $8,800 instead of my $5,500, I might ask for some relief. So this is all smoke and mirrors. Yes, the State Department of Assessment and Taxation values your property, but we should be doing better to manage the money we have efficiently and effectively so we don't have to raise taxes, and perhaps we can get rid of some things that are nice to have that really don't do much for us. For instance, I'm not picking on any one group, but I noticed that we had a press release. We're giving $60 million to 12 community groups. I think we give some money to Savage Community Association. I'm not saying that's all bad, but what I am saying is we should go through every single line item in the budget. We should zero base the budget and say, is this something we really want to spend our hard-earned money on? And I'm willing to bet that we will find a lot of things. This government is very large and very expensive, and we need to trim it down.
Ma'am, if you have a question, go on and come on up to the mic.
I'm interested in aging in place and so forth, but I will tell you that I paid off my house that gets me going every tax time is when I have to write that check that includes a rain tax of $43. And I would like to know exactly, I'm assuming that Howard County or Columbia itself is about 100,000 families, and I want to know what that, at least that money's being spent on, so I can not be as angry. Or if I am angry, can we please get that removed, because nowhere else in the county of the state has Hogan repealed it and left it to the counties to decide, and we capped it. Where at our north and the other counties did not. So I'd like to know where that money's going. And please remove it.
Thank you. So I can actually send you a full breakdown because it's in our budget. So you can see sort of when you look at each budget, you're able to see the $350 million we've directed to the school capital budget. You're able to see that watershed fee go to stormwater management projects. So some of those are also drainage projects right here in Laurel. They're all over the county, just so you know. But that's because we are receiving heavier rains. Our climate is changing and it's more intensive. And many of our communities were built before stormwater management. If you're living in Columbia, you were built without stormwater management. And so a lot of it is going to support those things retroactively and to go in and build that infrastructure to prevent the flooding, to prevent people's basements from being flooded, and to prevent loss of life like we've had in Ellicott City. But I appreciate you sharing that, and I will gladly follow up so you can see each project and know how you, then you can decide which ones to be angry about, and because I get you, I feel you.
Like you, I'd paid off my house, and I was fortunate one year to be able to pay my entire year's taxes in July. So in January, I get a bill for my rain tax. I also happened to get a bill for my water and sewer. And I looked at them, and they both had a charge for basically stormwater management. So I was confused. So I called, and I got the director of finance for Howard County at that time. And I said, I'm looking at this and it looks like they cover the same things, but it's two different payments. Oh, he says, oh no. He said, they're very different. He said, the rain tax does A, B, and C, but the stormwater tax does C, B, and A. We ought to, every once in a while, question what we're doing, go back and look. Why are we doing this? What good comes from it? I would like to see where all the money went that was collected. That's what I want to see, and then I'll decide whether I think that's still a good thing or not. But we don't do that. We just add on. We build on a base that's been there forever, and we put more and more and more on. We never go back and question, was this rain tax really useful? And that's what I want to do, and that's what I can do.
Hi guys. I've been here a long time, 42 years in the same house. And in the past, I would say 4 years, exponentially, the shabbiness of the county is more and more visible. With the growth comes more density, more money, more people, more traffic, more litter, more mattresses along the side of the road, more dead trees, more unmown grass, more islands in the street that aren't cut, that aren't maintained, street lights out, things getting a bit nasty looking. This is not the county that I lived in 10 years ago. We're what, one of the 10th wealthiest counties in the country, and we're starting to look like a third world country. You see pockets of it all around. In some place that is supposed to be a wealthy county. You go along Snowden River Parkway and it's a trash heap. You get off 29 at Route 40 and it's a trash heap. And I mean litter along the side of the road like you don't know. So is anybody going to clean up the county? That's a big line item in the budget.
Absolutely. So the Department of Public Works has expanded its contracts to have folks out there picking up off the side of the road for our county roads. 29 and 40 are state roads and it is absolutely a problem, especially at exit ramps. We have begged Governor Hogan to help with the state roads. They are, the state responsibility, but we are pitching in when we can because we agree, we don't want litter for the feeling it gives us, it feels shabby. It feels shabby. So we can do better. And so that's why we have increased those contracts. We've definitely suffered over the last few years between COVID and great resignations and making sure that we have staffing and hiring. But even with all that, we are doing what we can to contract around it to solve the problem because it can't wait. So you got to use the army you have, not the army you wish you had. So it's absolutely an issue. And then we've had, I think, a lot of the repaving work that has been done over the last 4 years has also benefited, help reduce the shabby feeling. Because when you have older asphalt, cracked asphalt, it just affects how you feel in that space, in that built environment. So continuing to invest in our infrastructure to maintain it, to make sure that we have the base to be able to maintain what we have, because a lot of the bills are coming due, right? A lot of our growth in the county was in Columbia, and now a lot of that maintenance is coming due. So it's absolutely something that we're focused and working on.
I don't particularly like Rudy Giuliani, but he talked about the broken window syndrome. And that's what you're talking about. The fact that people feel comfortable about throwing their litter and their half-eaten food, which brings vermin and other things. But the crime since 2016 has exploded. I live in one of the worst, we both live in the same village, but she lives in a much better area than I do. I live
We live in different villages, Bill.
Oh, that's right, you're Kings Kentucky.
I live right around the corner off Homer Housing.
She's in one of the nicer villages. I'm not, I'm in Owen Brown. It is a war zone. And we're doing nothing concrete that I can see about it. We need to start enforcing whatever laws, regulations. If we need more, we need to make sure that we have them. We just can't go along and just say, oh, it's okay if somebody throws their half-eaten Whopper out the window. So I'm a law and order guy. I'm for enforcing whatever laws we have, and if they're not sufficient, we need to make some more.
All right, I'll take one more question, then we'll go to halftime, okay?
I hear Columbia and schools and things like that. I'm also a retired person. I live right north Laurel, a lot up from Route 1. Grass doesn't get cut. Builders come in, build 5 homes. The county has them put street trees in that they don't maintain. They put the path to North Laurel Park. You got grass growing through the asphalt. You got trees hanging off that you got to walk into somebody's driveway to get down to the park. And that's my main concern. I mean, I don't have kids in school in, the temporaries, but the thing is something's got to be done. And every time I call the county about Route 1, and I emailed your office right and left, and you have been helpful. The thing is they tell me, oh, Route 1 is state. No, California isn't state. I have to tell them, look at your property. Turf Motel, not state. That is a trash infested with snakes, rats, and everything else. So that area needs to be looked at. You got blue collar people busting their butt, and they live in something that looks like the ghetto.
Years ago, across from the California Inn, Randy's California Inn, there was Pfister's Trailer Park. And there was a big brouhaha in Howard County that it was unthinkable to have human beings have to live in trailers. But we'll put our kids in them to go to an education. So, I mean, we have situational ethics.
Well, also, and the county owns the property behind the hotel and behind the antique dealership, that old antique.
Oh.
They own all of that.
So just to clarify, is you'd like to see what the candidates would do if elected to council in order to help clean up those areas or better police those businesses along the Route 1 corridor that are under the county's responsibility.
And it's not the county picking up the trash, it's some nice man picking up the trash and notifying the click it or share.
But you bring up an interesting thing about the California. Why do we own that?
We don't own that.
Oh, we don't?
We do not own the California Inn, but life would be a lot easier if we did. Only
But everybody should drive down there. I went to a Calvin Ball meeting one time, and a lady that represented works with them said, oh, I never, she lives in Emerson. She goes, I never go down that way. And I said, well, then no wonder, you don't get looks like that ghetto. And in crime too.
Yeah.
Let's let candidate Rigby address your concerns, and then candidate Campbell will have his response as well.
No, you're totally right. I mean, Randy's California Inn is one of the banes of my existence as well. They cut a hole in the fence, the illegal activity starts up, you get them out to do code enforcement, they fix up the fence, and then it just repeats over and over and over, and it is exhausting for everybody who lives near it. So the Housing Commission owns the property behind the Econo Lodge Motel. And then the county also owns that Hearst property, which had the proposal for the Wawa and the restaurants that was deemed undesirable by the community. And so I think that there are a lot of things we can do. One thing I've done is work to restructure our Route 1 facade tax credit, and that's not necessarily that's to more fix up some of the facades of the properties around, because some of them are blighted. So we really want to get them looking a lot better. The most recent example I can think of is the sort of falling down chain link fence that was by Airco, and that was been replaced with a much more visually attractive metal fence, and it has more screening as well. But I think in terms of what can be done, we need to, again, the general plan. That is so important for Route 1. There have been a million visions and none of them have come to fruition, not one. It is not the walkable corridor that I think was proposed over a decade ago. That has not come to fruition. Now they're looking at sort of nodes and then corridors. So areas of investment and then just having the corridor there. And it is profoundly frustrating, but I think if we can assemble some of those parcels, part of the issue is that a lot of the ones on Route 1 are very shallow. So you kind of have to have more than one to make it something viable for like a restaurant or, not the current uses that we have, like the cars or junkyards or things like that on Route 1. But using the Route 1 tax credit and having the Economic Development Authority, they have really been going after companies. But then there's also another issue where the zoning of what uses. All right, well, if anyone wants to ask about modified engines and racing and darties at Savage Park, we can also talk about that.
All right, well, let candidate Campbell respond to the concerns about the blighted properties on Route 1.
Sorry, just to summarize, it's getting that, the code enforcement, staying on top of bad actors. It's getting Economic Development Authority to work with existing property owners, and it's having our community planning document be truly visionary, but also based in reality so it can achieve the goals it sets.
I'm just in awe because it looks like we can fix this by just having a plan. It's not that simple. It's not that simple. And we do need a plan, but I would say that we should probably hold off on the general plan till we figure out what we want our community to look like and what we want for services instead of just kind of hodgepodge. What I've seen in my research on the county is a lot of times we'll have a problem and we'll say, oh, we need money for school construction, so we're gonna put this development fee on. And then later on, somehow the development fee gets waived for somebody, or it's reduced, or it's changed. We should have a plan that people can trust that's going to be stable for a long period of time. And part of that is also a good, adequate public facilities ordinance, but they work hand in hand. I don't know why the county can't enforce its ordinances for property that's in bad shape. It doesn't make any sense to me. We have a large county government. We don't have enough enforcement people to go down. We can't track down the owner of the property and make them clean it up or fine them. We can't, if it's really egregious, could we do something like proceed with eminent domain and take it away from them at a fair price? We don't, if it's on Route 1, it seems to get ignored. Anything east of 29 in Howard County appears to be ignored.
All right. At this time, I have 7:18. If it's agreeable with the candidates, could we resume at 7:25?
Sure.
All right. Break time, everyone. And since we're after the halftime, candidate Campbell will be given the opportunity to respond first, followed by candidate Rigby. So, out of the basket, what is your stance on development in historic districts?
Well, my stance on development in general is, I think that we have not managed it well, and particularly in historic districts, I think we have an obligation to make sure that it's appropriate for the area, and it doesn't overburden the community and the services for the community. So right now, I'm not a big proponent of future development until we can get good rules in place, like fixing our adequate public facilities ordinance and our general plan. I'm not in favor of much at all, and we're running out of land. If we want more density, we can continue to develop. That I think that's a plan for failure. So in historic areas, I'd be even more cautious than the county in general. The county in general, I think we're at the end of our residential development per se. We'll have a few dozens of homes here instead of hundreds of homes. We're running out of land.
Okay. Kendra Rigby, your take on your stance on development in historic districts?
Sure. So I think when you look at what was done with the Savage Remainder property, that was a property that was adjacent to, should I be louder in the back? Okay. Okay. I was told I need to boom, so it's my attempt. When you look at areas like the Savage Remainder, that was going to be with new residential development. It is, although Savage does not quite have the same technical historic district that some of the other areas like Old Ellicott City or Lawyers Hill have, I still consider it a historic district, and I think many folks here. The historic charm is vital to Savage. So when we were looking at that remainder property, I was very excited that the county was able to purchase that land to retain it, to retain the forests that were on it, and blend it into the park so that way we have more natural green space there. I think any development needs to be thoughtful, no matter where it is, but if you're in a historic district, it needs to be especially thoughtful. If we're talking about Ellicott City, I mean, that is a pretty no-go zone because of it's at the bottom of the bowl and we just cannot handle any more over there. But also, I think it's important to be really clear that when we're looking at things like the general plan, a lot of the density that's talked about is at transit-oriented development zones, so right around the train stations. It's not in our neighborhoods here, unless anyone is from Annapolis Junction Department. But it's really geared towards those train stations in those areas, just to clarify that.
Okay. All right. So here's another question from the basket here. In terms of, Howard County projects, big ticket items that you're aware of, if you're elected, what would you consider the lowest priority capital projects that most likely would remain uncompleted by the end of your next term?
Well, I don't know. You have to look at that in context of what is the value of it. However, we have spent a lot of money on some things that I really question. One is downtown Columbia revitalization project is going to cost us $182 million. We're going to put 1,697 residences in there. We're giving up our library and going to have to build a new central library. We bought Toby's Dinner Theater. Now, I don't know anything about running a dinner theater, but the Parks and Rec are going to do it. I think that if you want to make a little money in dinner theater, you start off with a lot of money. And unfortunately, it'll be our money. We're going to build a new fire station. We're going to put 500 residential units on top of our fire station. Probably the only one in the United States that isn't standalone. And we could be the only community that ever had a fire station destroyed by an apartment fire. So those are some things that you have to look at and say, these are, I think, really bad ideas. So I would like, as I said before, get in and look at everything in the budget and make sure that this could have bought a high school, a middle school, and an elementary school, and instead we're revitalizing downtown Columbia. That is not fair to anybody in the county, but particularly those people that don't live in Columbia.
Okay. And again, for candidate Rigby, so for big ticket items, big projects that you're aware of in the works for Howard County, what would you consider to be the lowest priority capital projects that are most likely will remain uncompleted by the end of the next term?
I mean, we're a full-service county, so when you call 911, you should expect someone to answer that call. When you call someone for service, you should expect them to be there. So I'm not comfortable with, not building our fire stations or some of our community parks, our green spaces, our areas for residents to connect. When it comes to the library, the existing central library is woefully undersized. And we see that both in the crunches in their parking lot there, but also in the community meeting spaces. You may not be aware, but the Howard County Library, those rooms are the only rooms available if anybody here wants to have a meeting for any reason. Those meeting rooms in the library system are where people do it. It's where there are HOA meetings, it's where there's community meetings, it's where there's nonprofit meetings, it's where there's mom groups meetings. They are hubs of connection for our community. And when you look at the data and the research that's been done in terms of what our community is using and utilizing, we really do need more space there. And if you look at the whole downtown Columbia plan, this is, before either of our time running for office, but what they did in the plan is that they coupled the housing commission projects like the cultural center and the fire station and the library. They coupled those with community amenities. So there is a benefit to, if you need EMS personnel, that they are right there and able to serve you. There are again, I'm happy to talk about modified engines and those efforts, but really, those projects, the way that they are structured, they work to ensure that we have that affordable housing, that the 500 units are directed towards seniors. We need that senior housing.
And again, I'm sorry, I just want to refocus. So, and it's a valid answer if your answer would basically say that none of the ongoing capital projects in Howard County, you don't consider any of them to be lowest priority, or you would like to see all of them be funded by the completion of your next term. That's a valid answer.
Okay.
Would that make sense? Just to answer the question. That's all.
Yeah, generally speaking, yes. And I think one of the best things we've done is get the out years in line. When I started my term, the out years were like a wish list. So you'd look at one capital budget year and it'd be funded, but then you'd go look at an individual project and say, oh, it's going to be funded the next year and the next year, but it never was because they put the out years in a wish list. So when you look at the capital budget now, it is way more accurate and you don't have to worry about that wish list effect, so you can know what's being funded. So I would say generally, I'm pretty supportive. I'm trying to think of an issue, but I think bridge inspections are important, fire stations are important, so.
I'll move on to the next question, and this is kind of a completely different topic. So the county's population has grown from approximately 59,000 to 335,000 since the county charter established 5 council districts. The question is, why hasn't the council been expanded to give additional communities, such as Savage, North Laurel, Jessup, or Elbridge, their own representatives? The further statement is Columbia controls approximately 60% of the council, but only has roughly 1/3 of the county population. So, what is your opinion on potentially expanding the county council to have more representation from more communities? or have additional members of the council?
I put some of these up on the table. The charter, there was a charter review commission, and I testified at it a couple of times, and I suggested that we expand the county council to 7 members. One, there is a more diverse population in the county than just Columbia. You are not Columbia. But Columbia does control the county council. I didn't make this map up, but I testified in favor of it. It shows 7 council districts, and Savage and North Laurel and part of Jessup would be getting an additional one, and Elkridge would be getting an additional one. As much as I might like you, I'm not your neighbor. I'm not your friend. You need to be represented by your neighbors and your friends. I will do my best job to make sure that Savage and North Laurel and other areas in the southeast corner of the county, which would be my district, are well served. But my goal would be to get you your own representative. The county council, the Charter Review Commission recommended that to the county council, I believe, and the county council voted it down.
Candidate Rigby, your response to the opinion of potentially expanding the council to allow more representation in various other areas of the county, or just add council members in general. Your thoughts?
Sure. So I guess I'll just start by saying I do consider you us neighbors because my kids go to Bowman. I'm at the bakery. I'm in the park. You'll see me riding my bike around very slowly up Savage Guilford Road, or very slowly up the hill along the trail. But I would be open to expanding it. I think we do have a smaller body. I think that going to 7 could make a lot of sense. So I'd be open to that.
Okay. At this time, if anyone has any questions, please come up to the mic. Please go ahead and share your thoughts, and we can get some feedback from both of our council members, or candidates, I'm sorry.
We have another issue in Savage that every year after year, everybody promises that they're going to do something about it. They're not state or county or this or that, and we're not getting anything settled with this. If you go up Savage Guilford Road as early as 6 o'clock in the morning till about 9 when the school starts, you can't move. I can't imagine the people who live on that street trying to get out of their driveways with all of that. Now, Bethel Christian Academy has an entrance that they're supposed to be using, and the cars are supposed to drive around, drop the kids off, and go out on Lincoln Street. Well, I don't think they're following that plan either, which is causing more problems to Savage Guilford Road. So, fast forwarding, there's another issue with Savage. They changed the traffic light down here at Route 1, and instead of making a lane that would go straight or a lane that would turn right, they made it all a right turn lane. So they're backing traffic up all the way to Baldwin Street. This is about, I guess, the 3rd or 4th hearing that I've talked about it, and it gets really frustrating when you try to get out of your driveway in the morning and you got that mess.
So do you mind if so again, we're talking about traffic congestion related to schools, because we have a lot of schools in close proximity. It's exacerbated by the shortage of school bus drivers right now. So more parents than ever are having to drive their kids or drop them off in person. And we also have problems locally with that light at Route 1 and Baltimore, and where just basically the timing of the light, sometimes if it's 4 minutes between being able to go one way, if you hit it the wrong way, and traffic just backs up as a result. So, Candidate Campbell, how would you address those concerns?
Well, one of the things, getting to the school buses, we spent $51.4 million this year. That was the plan. It's going to be more than that because the bus drivers have received raises, and diesel fuel, although gasoline has been coming down, nationwide diesel fuel is between $4.50 and $5 a gallon. We have 480 bus routes. Some of them are done for reasons other than getting kids to the school that is in their neighborhood. Every 8 bus routes that we can eliminate, we could free up $1 million to do other things like street improvements. So one of the things I think we should do as a council is get out of Ellicott City, get out of the George Howard building, have local hearings, listen to the community, find out what their issues are, and if you have any suggestions. I don't even know where Lincoln Street is, but I'm sure somebody here could explain to me in detail why it's a problem. So I think it's an obligation of the elected officials to get out into the community and listen to their problems. I'm retired. This will be a full-time job for me. Somebody may be smarter than me, but they're not going to outwork me. I will be in your communities. I'll come to your community association meetings. I'll find out what your problems are. And if I can solve them, I will tell you and I'll work hard for it. And if I don't agree with you, I'll tell you that too.
I know they put these kickouts and things all over town to slow traffic down. That has been the biggest pain in the behind since they've done that. The buses, I'm a retired school bus driver. So I know when you go around the curve, you have to swing your bus out in order for the back end to come around. I couldn't tell you how many times I've sat and went like this because I thought that a truck that's sitting here and can't go anywhere because of the traffic, the back end of that bus is going to smack that truck. You can't get people to do anything.
Well, like I said, so, we're going to stick with the original question. We can bring up the complete streets issues or issues with that in a separate question. Is that okay?
Yeah.
So again, how would you address, again, the congestion around the schools for parents dropping off their kids and or problems with problematic intersections with long wait times?
Well, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, you can finish.
One of the things is to make it, at least for elementary and middle schools, it was always the theory that the children would be able to walk for the most part, unless they had a reason that they needed transportation. I'd like to look and see if that's really what's happening. Why do we need to bus children to the schools? And why aren't the school buses running since we're paying almost $500,000 for transportation? Why is this a problem? And then if it's a continuing problem, what can we do to ease the traffic? What options do we have from an engineering standpoint? I don't think we have a lot here because you've got a very close community. Somebody would be really upset about giving up 10 feet of their front lawn. But we should at least look at it.
Candidate Rigby, again, a question on the congestion around getting kids to schools, how that impacts other people in the neighborhood, or problem intersections in general that have long wait times.
Sure, so tonight I'm going to go home and contact DPW and see if we can get out there and get them out there with me to watch and time the light in person, not just, look at what the numbers say on a computer, but actually get out there and see it. So that's what I'm going to do tonight. But what I've been doing and done is that when it comes to our Complete Streets policy, one of the guiding goals and metrics that we are tracking is to remove what's called hazard busing. So that's when children are taking a bus to school because they have an unsafe route to walk. And an example of this would be just up off of Guilford Road. Those kids get on a bus to go to Guilford Elementary. And they do that because it is not safe for them to walk. So we finally got the light, which is an improvement from the four-way stop, though there's certainly improvements to be made in that light area. But and then the next step is really getting those sidewalks connected along Guilford Road, so you can remove that hazard busing. You can take that bus and redirect that money into the operating budget to support students in the classroom. And then I feel like there was a third thing.
For problem intersections, and again, I think Myra's other statement regarding some of the consequences of the Complete Streets bump outs and traffic calming.
Yeah, so it's certainly a trade-off, and we did try and push for truck aprons, which are they're like a soft curb instead of the hard curb bump out. But we were unfortunately overruled by the engineers. But really, at these problem intersections, going there, and I know what it was. So this is how it relates. So right before the pandemic, a bunch of us were actually here with the former principal of Bowman Bridge, with the middle school principal, Principal Rob, and it was about the issue of drop off and pick up at the schools. And the things that came out of that meeting were primarily that we, as a school community, they are pushing parents at Bowman to utilize the Patuxent Valley side, because what I'm sure you've noticed is that you have a lot of people waiting to turn right, and they're not letting the people who need to turn left get in. So that way that builds this huge line back up. So keep getting, you know, more of those cars that are turning right to get out of there, to not even be there in the first place, so the people who are turning left can do that easier. Then the next steps that we were going to take was to bring out some cones and sort of do some practice guidance of the traffic for whether it's a turn lane or not. But since that kind of got shelved because of the pandemic and school stopped and all of that, it did fall off. So let's get it back on. We'll get the cones out there. We'll see what happens.
Any further comments on that from candidate Campbell?
Well, I'd be careful about engineering our way out of this. You don't live in Columbia, but I do. There's a road called Oakland Mills Road, and we've just spent a lot of money making a 4-lane road a 2-lane road. And we've put islands for pedestrians to cross where I've never seen anybody cross in the 48 years I've lived there, because there's nothing to go to. So we have to be careful about just leaping forward to a technology change. And what's wrong with having a crossing guard out there directing traffic until you can figure out what you want to do?
All right. Moving on, next question.
Jeff Smith. I'm the volunteer treasurer here at Baldwin Hall, and first I want to thank you both for embracing public service and stepping up on the stage and listening to all our criticisms and answering all our questions, because none of us would want to be sitting where you are. So thank you, both of you. I wanted to say that there's a lot of CIPs, capital projects that have been on the books in this part of the county for a while, and often they get scooped, even though the engineering's done, planning's done, they get scooped by other very savvy, strong interests in other parts of the county, Clarksville and Lincoln City and so on. And so I totally get what you're talking about, that we have to sit back and reassess and look at our planning, but that puts us way back, years back in the queue. So there's a balancing act. We gotta go forward with what we already have somewhere planned, because everybody's going to take all that funding for the next several years and move on their CIP. So it's a hard thing to call. So how would you approach wrestling with the interests of the other counties to get our tax money into some of our CIPs that would be good CIPs? Because once we take a breath, everybody takes that money again. So anyway, thanks.
One, you've got to remember that budgeting is like combat. You have to be very well prepared. You've got to get in there. You've got to fight for your side. I would be representing your interests. So I'd be as strong an advocate as I could, fairly. I would use facts, and I would try to make a case for anything that you want. And I would do my very best. I'm not fat. This is all scar tissue. I'm a fighter. I'll fight for you. I'll fight for your family. I'll fight for our community. I know that the southeastern part of this county has been a redheaded stepchild forever, and you haven't been getting a squat. And I'd like to change that. And I will fight for you as hard as I can. And I've got a pretty good record. Even when I've lost, nobody ever came back looking for a rematch.
All right. Candidate Rigby, your thoughts on the comments regarding capital improvement projects that have been studied out, that have been assessed and seen as worthy, but somehow the money seems to get reprioritized before we actually see results. What are your thoughts on how to address that, how to improve the completion rate for some of those?
Sure. So if everyone's fighting and shouting, then no one can be heard. So it's really important that we take a collaborative approach, because it is a legislative body. And it also means you have to work with the county executive, because they fund the budget. They set what you need me to speak up, don't you? Yes, okay. So the county executive sets that budget, and I am so glad that over the last 4 years, southeastern Howard County has received so much more investment than it has over the previous 4 years and the 4 years before that. Whether it's for drainage projects, roads projects, schools projects, you name it, parks projects, we have invested in southeastern Howard County. When it comes to how do you prioritize those funds and how do you work with state partners, at the current makeup of the council and executive take a very forward-looking approach. We go after every state dollar we can get because we can use your Howard County dollar even better then. So whether it's transportation alternatives programs that we use, those are state money that we use to then do the paving here. So that way we don't have to use Howard County dollars and we can maximize your tax dollars for your investments that are important in the community. So I think that's really the way we do it.
Okay, so our 2 people in line are going to be our last in-person questioners. If you have any other questions, I would please direct you to Susan back there. You can write them down on paper. We'll provide any questions that don't get answered in person to the candidates for them to respond at their convenience at a later time. Okay? And our next question.
Okay, so my name is Lee Chen. I also running for school board. Actually, also I'm a resident in North Laurel. I feel the pain just like you have of the school traffic. So imagine my daughter went to is going to the reservoir school. That's a 4 school, 1 traffic line, and 1 way in. So imagine the traffic, the bus also back up, and the schedule doesn't work for many kids, and the parents choose to drop off. So you can imagine the rainy day is really pull the traffic up. And you can imagine North Laurel so much development. So as a council member, I really want to hear what's the plan to address 4 schools at same spot, 1 traffic line. How can we reduce the traffic congestion? So thank you.
Well, I haven't seen the traffic data, but that would be one of the first things that I would do. Some of the road things that we have done have not been very safe. In my youth, I was a National Transportation Safety Board accident investigator. And some of the conditions that we have on our county roads are inherently unsafe. And I think around the schools, because you get people like the ones racing up and down the road here who will do stupid things to get around the traffic block that we're having for school with the children and the parents and so forth. So the first thing you need to do is to get the data. I have not seen the engineering data from our public works people, and that's one of the things I want to look at and get traffic data on how much traffic is going on a particular road and when it's going there. So the first thing you need to do, you're an engineer, is get the data. The data will tell you what your alternatives are, and then you have to choose what you want to do. So that would be the first thing I would do is let's have a full court press on all of the schools that are having traffic issues and see what we can do to, fix that.
So I think part of it is having good relationships between the bodies. So the Board of Ed right now is looking at changing start times, and in an effort to make it budget neutral, they are expanding walk zones. So I think one consequence that we are going to see from that is that you will have more car riders. So we're about to have even more, I guess, based on whatever the Board of Education ultimately ends up deciding. One of the best things that they could do specifically for that cluster of schools is to look at the timing and the staggering of those start times. Because when you have multiple schools arriving at the same time, it's just going to create conflicts. So staggering them is one thing that'll really help. The second is eliminating some of these double runs. Which, if you don't know, our students right now, some are picked up basically at the crack of dawn and dropped off at school an hour earlier just so that bus can get back out and get more kids. It's not good for student health, it's not good for student readiness, it's not good for traffic, it is a Band-Aid solution. So making sure that we stagger times at clustered schools so that way all the traffic isn't happening at once would be my biggest suggestion, but really working with our Board of Ed partners to understand the demands that are placed on the roads and then balancing them out. And then when you have places like Bowman and PVMS that share a campus, bringing those administrators together to co-solve those problems. And now we have a new administrator at Bowman, so it might be time to reconnect her with Principal Rob in those conversations to reduce that traffic.
Thank you.
Sure.
I'm not sure if this is part of what the county council decides, but I'm asking on behalf of all voters and taxpayers in Howard County, how do each of you feel about county employees going back to work in their offices if they're not back by now? Because I had 2 occasions to go into the county office building in Ellicott City in July and August, and there weren't very many people there. I went into the finance office, there were 8 desks and there were 2 people. I went into the permits office, there were about 10 desks and 2 people. They're not back. And we're paying their salaries and they're working from home, and I don't think they're working very efficiently.
Well, I've had some problems. I have called numerous times to see if I can put my campaign signs up on the Gorman Mansion property. And I've not been able to get a hold of anybody. I've talked to Public Works, I've talked to zoning and planning, I've talked to everybody. I can't get a hold of anybody. The remote work is, it works in some instances, but it doesn't work really well for personal services. And I think that you're seeing more and more employers, Elon Musk and a few others have said that it was an experiment we had to do because of the pandemic. And we tried, and it didn't work, just like distance learning didn't work. I mean, nationwide, there are report cards coming out. We won't get our report card in Maryland until January, after the election. But the performance has fallen off about 6% for English and about 9% for math countrywide. And our kids can't afford that kind of loss. I've got the marks here for all state report cards for our schools here, and they're at best mediocre. And some of them are failing in District 3. And the same with the workers. It's very frustrating. I would like to see people get back to a more normal work schedule. If they're there to serve the public, they should be there to serve the public, and you should be able to get an answer fairly quickly. Now, the county council doesn't control that. That would be the executive controls the workforce, but we could certainly make our voice known and try to get everybody back to where they need to be.
Ken, Rigby, your response to the question about remote work and how it's affected county services and availability for residents?
Sure, so it's very job specific. We have a lot of employees who never stop working. I mean, you flush a toilet and they are there at the Tucson Water Reclamation Plant. You cannot take a break on that kind of stuff. So they have been there and they have been working. And then we have other employees because of their jobs who may be able to do more remote work. And I think it really is job specific, but it's also person specific. Some people thrive in that environment and some people don't. So you really have to have that human element and knowing who's in the office and having those, supporting the employees so that way they're empowered to do their work. Treat them like adults because they are adults. I think everyone here is capable of, hopefully capable of doing your job, but we have a lot of great county employees who do great work. And there are people who thrive in remote environments. I know it's not the old way of doing things, but it's definitely, I think we can work towards a hybrid world where we have some people in some of the time, some people out some of the time. Because the other thing is we have a lot of leased space as a county. So if we're looking to save our dollars, then we should be looking at reducing some of that office space. Are there offices where you can take that desk and share it between 2 people? One person uses it 2.5 days, the other person uses it 2.5 days, and then they're working from home the rest of the time. But that would save county taxpayer dollars, and so we need to be looking at the most efficient use of our funds that get residents the services they need. So if you are in a position where you pick up the phone and you're there for someone, or someone walks in and you're there to receive a person, you need to be there. If someone's showing up to the front desk at DILP or the front desk at DPZ and no one is there, that's a problem. So thank you for sharing that.
All right, so we are at 8 o'clock. If everyone is willing to bear with me and be patient for a few minutes, I just want to give the candidates a little bit of wild card time, 2 minutes each, to discuss whatever other topics they had on their minds when they came here that maybe didn't get asked in a question specifically. If everyone's agreeable, all right. You've got 2 minutes, candidate Campbell, and then it'll be candidate Rigby.
First, I'd like to thank everybody for showing up. I know it's kind of a hard time to get out of your house and come to something like this. This is probably the most consequential election we're going to have in my 48 years in Howard County. We are at the cusp of either continuing to have a wonderful place to live, or we're going to become inner city Baltimore in a few years. And for the first time in a long time, you have a choice on which path you can take. I don't think there's a larger gap between our visions of what the county should look like than you could possibly get. Whoever you vote for, you will know what you're going to get. You vote for my opponent, you're going to get the same type of government you've had for 4 years. If that's satisfactory, please vote for her. If you think that we're headed in the wrong direction, if you think that we need a hard right turnaround or a hard left, and we have to get control of our spending, we have to get control of where our children are educated and how their safety is taken care of, then I think that the choice is to vote for me. You have a choice. Choose wisely. As I said, I will make this my full-time job. I am a very hard worker. I do a lot of research. If I come up with something, it's going to be thoughtful. I have worked with both sides of the aisle my entire career. In 1998, President Clinton gave me the highest award that the president can give to a career senior executive. 4 years later, George W. Bush, a Republican, nominated me to be the Assistant Secretary for Management and CFO at VA, and I was confirmed by the U.S. Senate. I've spent my 45-year career working with both sides of the aisle. I know I can work with the colleagues who are not going to be from my party. We need to put people first, not our parties. I will not be representing just the Republicans in Howard County District 3. I will be representing everybody. I'll be representing Greens, Democrats, Independents, anybody that is a resident here. I will do my very best to serve you well. So, thank you.
Candidate Rigby, again, the floor is yours. 2 minutes, please.
Thank you. Well, I absolutely agree that we serve people. It doesn't matter to me what your party is. If you're a resident of District 3, you deserve the best service, the best response that is possible. To be clear about the vision that I have for this wonderful place where I was born and raised, and where I'm raising my family and taking care of my parents, is that Howard County is a place where everyone can thrive, regardless of your age or stage in life, that there is opportunity available for you here in this wonderful place. That we have green spaces, that we have opportunities to connect with nature, that we also at the same time are safe and live in a welcoming community. Those are the things that are vitally important to me, and I'd love to hear what is important to you, so you can always reach out. I'm always meeting folks over at what is now, I guess, Rogan Art, and I'm always down to have a conversation and hear your perspective. So thank you so much for this forum. It's great to be here, especially with the renovations that are complete.
All right, folks, that wraps up our forum. Again, any questions that you didn't get a chance to ask in person, if you wanted to write those down with Susan, we can get those questions to the candidates for them to respond to. Or, of course, I'm sure that the candidates have their campaign staff who could address things directly through that.
I have literature up here at the front if you want anything, including things like the map for the 7 county council districts. If you want a street sign, please take one. There are plenty out front. I just ask that you put it on your own private property and not stick it on the public property. And that 100% recyclable, pull the metal off, stick it in your recycling, in your blue tent, your blue thing. And
Also, I was going to say, I think we both have websites, so you can check out more about me at christianarigby.com. And just so everyone knows, I'm participating in the Citizens Election Fund, which means I'm only accepting contributions from individuals and only smaller dollar amounts. So I'm running a real grassroots campaign. Thank you all so much.
Okay. Thank you all.